What's up, everybody? This is the Politician ReactsCAST. This is a part of the Politician Reacts YouTube channel. My name is Brian Burley. I'm joined today by an old USC college Republican and college USC Trojan friend, Jordan Tygh. He's going to talk about a few things that have been going on in his life. So thank you for firstly taking time to meet with me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, so we were just talking a second ago. We both went to USC. I graduated my undergrad in 2016. And you graduated in 2016 as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. With my master's.
And then this year. Prior to that, you were serving our country. If you want to maybe tell people a little bit about your background.
It was actually after. So about a month after I graduated from USC, I headed off to Cape May, New Jersey to go to boot camp for the U.S. Coast Guard. And for the last 4 years, well, I got out a year ago, but for the 4 years following my graduation from USC, I was in the Coast Guard. I deployed 3 separate occasions, twice to South America to interdict narcotics from the cartel out at sea, and then once to Asia to enforce sanctions on North Korea, as well as be a show of force against China.
Thank you for your service. Can't thank you enough for that. And so we were in the College Republicans together. When we were at USC, I was the secretary, and were you the vice president? Is that correct?
Yes, I was vice president. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then I went to go help fundraising with a few different campaigns. So I exited the College Republicans. I helped time a few congressional candidates, and I think Rubio was the presidential candidate we were helping at the time. So you went from USC to serve our country, and then what happened after that?
After that, I got a job with the California Republican Party to return back to the district I grew up in, the 48th Congressional District, to work on that race there, which I know you're familiar with.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Regional field director on there for the general election to help flip that seat, which fortunately we were able to do.
So yeah, obviously I ran in the primary in 48, and that was kind of contentious, and I kind of talked about that in the last podcast where I had Phil's part of the California Underground podcast and Instagram. So if you haven't checked that out on our YouTube, the audio is a little bad on that one. We're trying to work with it. It's a little bit difficult because obviously I have my own mic, but not everybody has a mic. So we're trying our best. But I ran in that primary, and it was a lot of back and forth, and Michelle Steele dumped about $400,000 on me in the first 10 days of the primary, and she wasn't very happy about it. But we flipped the seat, and thank you for helping us do that. So I remember when I was kind of just following you from a distance, and I saw the photo, the infamous photo with you in front of what was, I think it said official ballot drop box, right? Yes. And I messaged you, and I'm sure you got millions. You never responded. I don't blame you. You're probably like, you're probably overwhelmed with people saying what's going on.
A lot of people messaged me. I was like, I don't have time for this.
So what went on in that period of time from a broad perspective in terms of the ballot boxes? At the time I thought, well, this doesn't look exactly great, but I knew, obviously I ran, so you have to blur the lines of what the laws were. And I think Ruta did that back in 2018. But also the laws, I think everything you guys did was within the laws, but I think Ruta had pushed the limit. So what was that like? What was that whole process like where that picture came out? What was your life kind of?
I mean, it was just shocking. Like, I mean, to really get into it, to get maybe your viewers aren't as familiar, I'd want to rewind back to the year 2016 when we were both in college still. That was the year that the California State Legislature overwhelmingly passed AB Assembly Bill 1921, which legalized ballot harvesting in the state of California. I mean, in my opinion, it is the most loose ballot harvesting law in the entire country. There's very few regulations, but nevertheless, it's the law. The GOP fought it in the legislature. They lost. The governor signed it, Jerry Brown at the time. And they went on to fight it in the courts and also lost. In 2018, they didn't ballot harvest because as the GOP were against it, and personally I'm against it too. But because they didn't do it in 2018, we lost 7 House seats of the 14 that we had in California. So clearly, when it's the law of the land, as much as you're opposed to it, you don't have a choice except to engage in it, or else you're going to lose. At that point, it's political malpractice. So for the first time, the GOP, what's that?
You play by the rules, right?
Yeah, you play by the rules they set, and they set the rules. And as silly as those rules might be, you got to play by them in order to compete. So the GOP, for the first time, actually had a widespread ballot harvesting initiative. We had these essential little receptacle boxes that we collected ballots in at our campaign offices. So it was a way for Republican voters, and just another way for them to drop them off somewhere. At the time, President Trump was saying, don't send your mail-in ballot, vote on election day. But in Orange County, as I'm sure you're aware, we had less voting centers in person than we had in prior years because of the coronavirus pandemic. So lines were going to be longer. And, the president is telling our party not to vote or to vote in person with longer lines. So it was very strategic for these GOP offices to say, hey, look, ballot harvesting is legal here. You can drop your ballot off with us, and we will deliver it. We'll have a GOP operative safely deliver it to the campaign or the registrar of voters, which is all completely legal. And our hopes was that people that were deterred away from those long lines would still make sure that their vote was counted and it was supposed to be, which was a very, very close election. So really, everything we're doing was done by the rules, by the book. The GOP attorneys heavily vetted it, and people from the top down had planned this out. So really, my job, even though it looks like I was this mastermind, planning this devious guy planning the whole thing, I was really a low-level operative. The second lowest on the totem pole. Part of our job was to help promote the different things the GOP was doing through social media, especially in the coronavirus times where people were interacting in person. So that's what I did, and I was kind of the first one to cross that line, and I was obviously also the first one to really take that hit, and I effectively became the poster child for this apparent, voter fraud, ballot, tampering, all this stuff, which just wasn't true. The media, left-wing politicians, they were just making stuff up and lying.
Quick question. So from my perception, I don't know if you guys changed this, where there was potential trouble, which I guess was never found to be, true trouble, I guess in a
Yeah.
way, was the word official. They said official.
Yeah.
Was that dropped, or how was that?
Yeah, they did. That was the one agreement they had to pull. So I'll go back. One of the other lies that the left and politicians were saying was that we were just putting these boxes on street corners unattended, and that essentially we were harvesting ballots through inanimate objects, which is just a lie. All those boxes
You guys
were
didn't do
attended
that.
by.
I was driving around, and then there wasn't that. It wasn't that.
Yeah, there was not. Yeah, because it was a lie from them, and it was a lie that the government officials helped legitimize. All those boxes were staffed by people, so you were giving it to a person. We had a little card that we gave to you, said the person you were harvesting ballots to. It gave you a link to the Secretary of State's website to be able to track your ballot. So all of this was, by the books. I mean, and there's nothing in the law that says you can't have a receptacle box, which is why the GOP won every legal battle after the fact. You could have a shoebox, a Santa Claus sack. I mean, Democrats in 2016 or 2018, had like Santa Claus sacks, and they were going door to door in college dorms, rooms, houses, all these things, stuffing them full of ballots, throwing it over their shoulders, bringing it to the registrar of voters, and dumping them all there. And it was all completely within the confines of the law. As messed up as that is, as you and I can all agree on, they were following the law that they made, and so were we. And in my view, and again, I want to say for your viewers, those ballot receptacles were not my idea. This was high-level GOP operatives that came up with this. It was their idea from top down. We were just there helping roll it out.
Well,
But
ballot
nevertheless, I
harvesting is
will have
also
to say, what's that?
ballot harvesting is part of any campaign now that I think is going to be successful. I mean, we talked about it in the primary.
Until we make it illegal, it has to be done.
Yeah, we tried.
Which I don't think we'll be able to in California, just based on the legislature. But to have an actual, receptacle box that's locked and protected makes more sense to me than a Santa Claus sack or a shoe box or a Tupperware box or a wicker basket or whatever, So I don't think they were necessarily wrong in that. It's just, I think where they failed was they failed to check beforehand. I mean, at my level, it's not my job. When we're told this is legal, our lawyers approve it. It's not really my job to ask them. And it's also my job to trust. And this is where I failed. I should have took the advice from Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. But I trusted that everything at their higher level was done up to par. But apparently they didn't check with the Registrar of Voters first. They didn't check with the Secretary of State first. And I think their aspect was, well, hey, these are run by Democrats. The Secretary of State's a Democrat. We don't want to give up our strategy to them beforehand. But it could have been avoided. This whole fiasco could have been avoided if they had done that. Because then if the Democrats try to make an issue of it, we'd be like, whoa, you approved this.
So at the time, I said that it looked, not on your end, because I mean, you're not necessarily probably the head honcho of ballot harvesting. I think we both agree on that. You were just labeled that. It looked very unorganized on the Republican side and kind of embarrassing to some extent that they weren't prepared messaging wise. There was a little bit of a gap between when stuff happened.
Oh,
I don't know.
absolutely.
You don't have to comment on that. That was just me and my friends, here in Huntington Beach, our assumption of looking at it from kind of the outside looking in. I mean, obviously we were involved in elections too, but I
You're
have a
not
quick
wrong.
question.
You're definitely not wrong on that.
Yeah, is it because I argue with friends all the time, and you are obviously more involved with some of these campaigns. But I said I have a huge argument with friends. I said if they didn't ballot harvest, they wouldn't have won, the Republicans. Is
Yeah,
that
I
true?
mean,
I typically don't agree with that because there was a huge argument that Ruda only won because of ballot harvesting, but there was a lot of I thought Dana kind of mailed it in. He didn't really campaign very hard, and that includes ballot harvesting when it was legal at the time, but also just in terms of like I didn't see anything from him. I had like an army of people annoying me to vote for Ruda, which I didn't, but I didn't have anybody reaching out to Dana, and a lot of us Republicans said if you're not going to reach out to me, we'll just won't vote for anybody. You haven't earned the seat. You have to put in the work, right? Um, so I don't know if you agree with that assessment that without ballot harvesting at that point where Steele and Kim were at, it would have been really hard to win. I think maybe I don't remember what the Michelle Steele margin was. I think
it
it
was about
might
2%.
2%.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can really realistically harvest that much because I feel like I don't know.
It
Maybe
all
you
it
can
all
give some
just depends. I
perspective.
think I think we theoretically could have one. It's hard to say after the fact because we really got to nail down data, some of which I don't even really have the complete data for. But before you get to election day, you don't know how close some of these elections are going to be. We see some races that are decided by 10 votes, across the country. And this was supposed to be a very close one, which it was. So every little thing that you do will make a difference in getting across that finish line. And it's very possible, it would have been very possible, or even possible in the next election, that ballot harvesting will make that difference. And every little kind of piece of the pie makes that difference. Ballot harvesting really did play into that. Had we not ballot harvested at all, could we still have won? We might have edged it out, but it certainly wouldn't have been as close.
No, I think we agree with that to some extent. It obviously has an impact. And looking at, I don't know if you know what I'm working on with how I've redesignated my committee to 45. Obviously, Porter is probably a main culprit of ballot harvesting down in UCI and some of these other places.
Totally.
So you worked on with the California GOP, and then all this happened. What happened that kind of made it escalate to where we're at now in terms of, you talked a little bit about some of the things that you've been dealing with on a personal level, maybe maybe more than political. Uh, what happened from there? You said this has been getting covered by the news and a few other places.
Yeah. So back to the day that this was all happening, I started getting like all these like trolls on social media coming after me. And then, of course, I went to the GOP and I'm like, hey, this is getting out of hand. Like, we should really do something about this. And they're just, rolling their eyes, just like, oh, it's Democrats trying to intimidate you. Like, you've been in the military, you've been out of the game for a while. This is what they do. They've gotten even worse over the years. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay. And then I get home and there's two investigators from the DA's office waiting for me. And then I call them and I'm like, there's cops at my house. And they're like, what? Like, oh, like, run around like chickens with their heads cut off. Like, oh my God, how? That's not, it's legal. What's wrong? And then, so, that obviously happened and nothing came from that. But the bigger part was when the media still really started grabbing attention to it. Like I was getting calls from local news, national news, all the next couple of days. My phone was flooded with media attention. And I was everywhere. I was on Jimmy Kimmel, where he was, insinuating that I was some election fraudster. The Young Turks had me on there.
I did
Roland
see the
Martin
Jimmy
had me on
Kimmel
his show. Yeah, and
the
the
other
whole
day.
time they were just bashing me as like this criminal. Look at this entitled young white guy, like a classic Republican, stealing people's votes. They can't win without it. Blah blah blah. I mean, it really was insane. Like, it's very stressful and hurtful and very damaging to my reputation, of course. And part of the reason that happened is because the GOP took a whole day to admit that this was their operation. Again, I was a low-level staffer. None of this was my idea. I followed orders from point A to point B. I got permission. I followed protocol. Before I posted that image, I was like, hey, I know you guys want to promote this. Is this an appropriate picture? They're like, yeah, of course it's appropriate. Go ahead, post it. Like, we want to let people know this is a service we're offering. And so I was like, okay, everything was done by the books. And then when shit hit the fan there, it was like I was kind of left out, getting hit like, with all these bullets and arrows. And, and it was really damaging to my reputation that they waited the full day to be able to go and admit to that. So a lot of those initial headlines, which that's the biggest grab to it, were about me. It's like, look at this GOP official promoting these illegal boxes. Like, ooh, message me for convenient locations. Like, oh, like look what they're up to, and they just made it come across as so devious. And there was a lot of false accusations, lots of defamatory and dishonest remarks, straight up lies from
Yeah,
these
what did Jimmy
different.
Kimmel say about you? Pack you in the ballot box too, or something
Yeah,
like
he was
that?
like, someone should stuff him in that box. These people will
I
stop
mean,
at
it's a
nothing to
stupid
steal your
joke,
vote.
but yeah.
And part of it was, and I think that they knew what we were doing wasn't illegal. And I have it on good authority that Ruta's campaign were illegally ballot harvesting. But the left and their allies in the media saw they basically saw a way to make us look like we were doing something illegal. Because a lot of people that aren't political, I know you, myself, some of our mutual friends know a lot about ballot harvesting. It's common sense to us. But the average person probably doesn't know much about it, and they took advantage of that fact. So it's like, look, these party officials are taking your ballots. They're setting up operations at their offices and taking your ballots. It's like, yeah, that's legal. You made this law. You know what I mean? But they conveniently failed to mention that in a lot of these articles.
When I was running in the primary, there was we'd have discussions where anyone can ask questions, and the whole whole discussions would be taken over by ballot harvesting, and I felt like it was always overstated. Because like logically, and maybe you could speak to this more, but a lot of people don't trust random Joes turning in their ballot for them. I don't know what percent of ballot. I mean, it's probably. Do you think it's less than 1% of ballots were ballot harvested overall?
I don't have the data on it.
I know there were
a lot in
how
2018
many?
that Democrats.
Yeah, because how many total ballots were there? Like probably 250,000. So that means that be 25,000 ballots you had to collect. Even you'd have to have like a true army of people collecting thousands of ballots, and I don't know physically how many ballots you can collect from when voting by mail starts to that last day. I don't know what's physically possible. If you're knocking on doors, you can maybe knock on 50 doors an hour. So
I
know what I mean? It's
in 2018 with Democrats as well. They had people that were on payroll doing it. There were union folks in droves, people from across the state coming around and doing it. And it's easier, I would say, with their constituencies versus ours. I think conservative people are less likely to trust someone else with your ballot. I get it. We surprisingly had a lot of people ballot harvest with us, so there was that kind of trust there. Because we were Republican officials. But regardless, to take college kids for example, right? There's a much younger people are much less likely to vote. Ballot harvesting for them is a way to kind of pull them across the finish line. If these Democrat volunteers and operatives and activists, whomever, go to these college campuses and say, "Hey, give me your ballot, stuff it in their Santa Claus sack," that's essentially dragging them across the finish line, and that's getting a vote that they probably otherwise wouldn't have got.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. So you were a part of helping some of those campaigns, focused on probably Orange County, you would say, right?
Yeah, I mean, my region was the 40th congressional district, and to even further it down, really the south part of the 40th congressional district, which honestly at the time it was the perfect job for me because I grew up there. I mean, I grew up in Laguna Beach. I've spent a lot of time and lived in Newport Beach for a little. Lisa Viejo, I would hang out there a lot as a middle schooler. I went to middle school in St. Anne's and Laguna Niguel. So this was this was my home, and it was a real treat to really go back to the community that raised me and help flip that seed.
So were you able to finish all the way through the election day? Despite all this going on? Okay.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you follow the media, it was like, oh, this criminal, he's out of the, he's facing arrest and he's gone, he's going to need a replacement. But I mean, it was all BS. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't break any rules. Everything I did was under the permission and guidance of my supervisors. So there was no way legally that anybody could fire me or ethically fire me at that point. It just everything was done. All the mistakes that were made, for the most part, all the negative press, all this stuff was really at a higher level than mine. So
like the state party and all that.
Finished for.
Yeah. Okay, so you get through the end of the election, and that would have been November. We're May 6th now. What has happened since that period of time, and what has that been like? Are you still? And actually, I had one other question I almost forgot to ask. Did anybody from the Ruta campaign ever personally reach out to you regarding this whole thing?
No, never.
No, and it was just all a press.
Totally, yeah. And I've never from Democrats or Republicans, I haven't gotten an apology from anybody for any of this. And I was wrong in a lot of different ways from a lot of different types of people. And I still, to this day, I haven't gotten an apology from anybody. It's very frustrating. But yeah, the Ruta campaign, they never reached out to me. And I have it on good authority that, they knew that this was legal ballot harvesting. And
they knew it was going. I agree that they probably knew what was going on. So you finished through the election. What's it like after the election? She ekes it out. I would actually say on election night, we're sitting and we're watching. It didn't look good for a lot of these races, but I thought her numbers were really low for the first returns. But she ended up, at like maybe one or two in the morning, she ends up passing him, and he never comes back.
Yeah, and a lot of that was because the in-person votes started
counted last,
flowing in, which, as we talked about with Trump wanting Republicans to vote in person, we had a much higher turnout on election.
Yeah, it was a crazy turnaround on that. So what's it been like since that election day? Have you been dealing with harassment? Have you been dealing with, obviously you've been dealing with some legal, I don't want to say ramifications because that's not obviously the right word, legal proceedings because of, what the position you were put in.
Defamation and slander, yes.
Yeah. So are you still dealing with people reaching out to you personally and kind of harassing you? Because obviously you mentioned that on social media. Is that still a part even though you're removed?
Not necessarily. A lot of that was really done when this was being covered. And then sort of 2 weeks after, whatever, obviously there's a new scandal. There's a new, like, oh, Donald Trump Jr. did this, or, like there's a new flavor of the week for people to freak out on. I think it kind of stuck for a while with some of these kind of local activists, local, Twitter trolls, who I'm sure you're well aware of yourself. It sort of stuck with them for a little while, but as far as national and like more widespread, after a week and a half, it kind of went away. However, the damage is still there, even though the attention wasn't there on me. The damage is there because the way this story ended, the GOP won every single legal battle. There was no wrongdoing, and they won, and they kind of just walked away from it with their hands clean. 2 weeks after the election, Javier Becerra admitted there was no wrongdoing. He admitted that, hey, actually, it was all legal and it's a safe election. So whenever anyone tells you this election isn't safe, tell them they're wrong. It was safe everywhere. Because, of course, at that point, when Trump was challenging the legality of the election and insinuating there was election fraud, it helped their cause to say there was no election fraud and everything was safe, So he was clearly using his office. He was abusing his office, abusing his power for political gain. And I happen to be the biggest individual victim of kind of his corrupt behavior. But yeah, sort of after the fact there, I took a little time to lay low, but I couldn't just, walk away and let them do this to me and not, help finish. And it's such a critical time in the election. Those last 4 weeks, that is crunch time. So I came back, I resumed my job, I slowly emerged, and next thing you know, I was hitting the ground running full time again. And that was very hard to do, especially after everything that happened, fresh off the boat with everything that had happened. But I did it anyways because I didn't want to have the Democrats win in that sense. They successfully got rid of one of the higher operatives within a campaign, even though on the scale of the CAGOP was lower level. Within the 48th district, I was a higher one. Then what's to stop them from lying about innocent people in the future and doing this in the future? So I wanted to show them that they wouldn't get away with it. And I wanted to help get across the finish line, which we did, and we won, which was awesome. After that, it really wasn't great because, as I was talking about before, I was the face in the beginning of all this. And when I was the face in the beginning of all this, if you Google my name, it was like election fraud, felony, like crimes. So there was never, once the GOP started winning the legal battles, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post conveniently stopped covering those stories. To my knowledge, there's no story that they've printed about Javier Becerra admitting that it was all legal after all, that the GOP won these legal battles. Yeah, they always leave stuff out. Yeah, that subpoena. So they covered the beginning when it made us look bad, but then at the end when it didn't, they didn't cover it. Even beyond that, even the people who did kind of cover these GOP wins after, my name's really not mentioned in it. So you Google my name, it's all that initial breaking story, which is so damaging, of just devious looking crime and stuff, right? So I knew I had to go public with my story. I waited a little bit because, I wanted to try to find employment after, and after you win a campaign, if you win these elections, lots of employments in different areas start to open up. But by that point, it was so obvious that I was damaged goods, that my reputation had been so tarnished. Nobody wanted to touch me, despite knowing I did nothing wrong, despite knowing this wasn't my idea, despite knowing the PR failures wasn't my fault either. I had to suffer the consequences of all of this. And I was really left behind. I was damaged goods. Most of my former colleagues all got jobs in various different areas, and I didn't. It broke my reputation. There was really no one there to help pick up the pieces or support me throughout that. And that was really hurtful, kind of shocking. And, I knew at that point, I'm seen as a criminal. There's something I have, and there's nobody, I'm not bound to anybody anymore. I don't work for anybody anymore. I need to be able to go public with my story. And I did with the OC Register. And I don't know if you read that one, but Brooke did a really, really good job, a really fair and balanced job at covering what happened, how it went about. Following that, Bill Malusian, who I think is just a phenomenal reporter, who recently just got promoted to Fox National, he did his own story on it. Also absolutely phenomenal, total fair and balanced job at covering the story. And so things started to change around. A lot of the local, activists in the GOP side of things started getting behind me and saying, what was done to this guy is so unfair. Like, how can we just leave this guy behind? My story caught attention of higher level people as Javier Becerra was going through his nomination process. Obviously, I was the victim of his corruption, as a lot of people were. But they actually invited me to write an op-ed about the story that I had to go through. And I did go and write that op-ed. And it got a lot of attention. Yahoo picked it up. Various different conservative outlets picked it up. I mean, it was trending. It was flowing on Twitter. California Playbook got it. The Political Playbook got it. Carla Marinucci was tweeting about it. Ted Cruz's chief of staff was tweeting about it. People were using it as an argument in the U.S. Senate. So I really was able to get my story out there in a lot of different ways. I've been I've wrote for Town Hall talking about why we should defeat HR1 because of ballot harvesting. So I was able to, I think, be able to clear my name, and I'm still continuing to try to counter that negative media attention, going to different outlets to correct those records. Because if I didn't do any of this, I just would have faded away in obscurity as some kind of criminal, even though I wasn't.
Well, I'm sorry you've had to go through all this. It doesn't sound like it's done yet either. Sounds like it's going to be something that you're dealing with for at least a little while longer, right?
Yeah, and I'm not ending here either. I think I've done a good job at getting the message out, and saying, look, I'm a victim in this thing, and I think a lot of people see that. Beyond that, though, I'm moving forward with defamation lawsuits. I've been able to retain Harmeet Dillon, who I'm sure you know, she's a rock star, conservative legal warrior. And we're going to move forward with defamation lawsuits on some of these left-wing individuals, media personalities, left-wing organizations that defame me and blatantly lied about me. I'm not going to stop fighting until I've held every last one of them accountable, because you can't just lie about someone and destroy their life and get away with it. If I let them get away with it, what's stopping them from doing it to another innocent person in the future?
Well, I think that's a good endeavor to put yourself in and to spread awareness about that and try to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else.
Yeah,
so let's talk a little bit about what your plans are. We'll talk about California politics too. So you've now are in the process of moving to Florida. Are you looking to be involved politically going forward, or what's your long-term game plan? Or
I don't know. I love politics, but after everything I had to go through, and after how I really kind of felt left behind by everybody, on our side with all this, I will say our side on the professional side, the activists, as soon as I went forward with my story, they were phenomenal. I got a lot of support rallying behind me. I got a lot of donations donated to me regarding my lawsuit. I'm fundraising for that. So for your viewers, Push Back on Defamatory Lies, organized by Jordan Tygh on GoFundMe. Be sure to look it up. I could use all the help I can get to hold these real bad people accountable. So from the activist side, I really do appreciate their help and support. But I was really left behind by sort of the more professional side in politics. It was really kind of shocking to me, surprising. And it was like, do I really want to continue in a world like this where people will leave you behind as a matter of convenience, not even as a matter of what's right or wrong, because they all know that I was a victim in this thing. So that's tough. So I think what I'm doing actually, since I did those 4 years of service in the military, I'm using my GI Bill for another master's at the University of Miami. I'm going to use that time to maybe keep a pulse on politics. I have some friends that do some fundraising and stuff in Florida. I might help out with that. Maybe do some precinct walks for Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis. Who knows? But I also want to explore other career opportunities. I'm going back into the reserves for the military, so I'll be serving the reserves. Maybe go full time in that again. Maybe find a new career outlet. I'm not sure. I really want to use this next year and a half to really kind of take a step back, look things over and think about what I want to do going forward.
All I would say is don't close the door. I mean, as someone who's running and we need people that have a good perspective on ballot harvesting. There should be opportunities for someone who's been more heavily involved, especially as some of these states try to push some of these wacko bills into existence. So yeah, you did that. Let's talk a little bit about California politics, because that's something that we obviously both may have a little bit more experience with. I know back when we were in college, I thought, when I was starting to do all this stuff more politically back in 2013, that the Republican Party in California had a really good opportunity. I used to say that eventually the left's going to fall off the deep end, and there's going to be this big opening for a Republican or a conservative movement, even if it's not labeled as Republican, it'll be labeled as a conservative movement. But it just feels like, and I think maybe you might agree with me, we've talked about this kind of offline about the lack of organization. Now we're seeing it kind of with the recall, who we're going to get behind, and I'm trying my best to try to make sure we get behind one and that we don't split up the vote. What is your perspective on conservatism in California? Like I said, I used to be super optimistic in 2013. I'm still am optimistic, but obviously there's been a couple losses, and we're not in the best position that we could be considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I sadly lack a lot of optimism. I mean, it really pains me to say. I mean, I never wanted to leave California. It's my home. I grew up there. It's such a beautiful historical state with lots of great natural resources, lots of cool industry. But a lot of that cool industry is being driven out. A lot of those, affordability there just isn't there. Crime is on the rise. There are crazy laws being passed. And conservative people just seem to be on their way out. I can tell you from working on the campaign, even in the microcosm of Orange County there, a lot of the people we targeted were older people. A lot of our big base were people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s
moving out
for this stuff. And that's not as sustainable as younger people in their 20s and 30s. And the 20s and 30s are more overwhelmingly Democrats. I think in Orange County in particular, we never thought Orange County was going to go away. Even though the data, if you go back to like 2010, definitely suggested otherwise, but none of us said, oh, it's never going to happen. We all were kind of, our mind was in fog on that. It's Orange County, but it absolutely did happen. And it's continuing to rapidly shift to the left. You saw the supervisor seat just went to Katrina Foley. Democratic registration continues to outnumber Republican registration. It continues to be larger and larger margin every day. And a lot of this is for a lot of reasons, but you have, like I mentioned, the older people dying off, the newer generation, even if they had conservative parents. I mean, like I mentioned, I grew up in Orange County, grew up in California. I know a lot of people that I went to high school, middle school with, what have you, whose parents were good conservatives and they went and became liberals. They went off to college, they got brainwashed, they came back and they're liberals now. Or high density development. Orange County has had a lot of high density development in the last 10 years, which has made it more affordable, which leads a lot more people in from places like Los Angeles who are Democrats, and they are adding to the voter rolls of Democrats. You have conservative people moving, people like my parents. I mean, they saw the writing on the wall 4 years ago. They left right after I joined the military, and they got out. They're just one of tons and tons of people that are doing that. So all of this, affects that and is leading to a rapid rise in Democrat registration in Orange County. And quite frankly, across California, they have a stranglehold on it. They pass all sorts of laws that benefit them and disadvantage the Republicans. They, create a quality of life, all sorts of things that they know is going to make it harder for Republicans to want to succeed. And we've seen that happen.
Yeah, my perspective is a little bit more optimistic, because if you look at the map and just how people change over time, I've had friends that, when I was in college, I'd talk to people that didn't agree with me politically. It's, just because you have differences doesn't mean you're not friends with certain people. But some of them have actually gone more conservative since they've seen stuff going on in the world. They might have been more moderate or left-leaning moderate. Now they're right-leaning moderate or conservative, like dark red conservative. So I think that will start to happen. We've seen that kind of in Florida with even like, minority voters like Hispanics were voting for Trump at a higher rate than people expected. You see that in Texas, and you could start to see that kind of happen in California if things get bad enough. I think that we'll see that at some point. The registration bleeding has to stop.
I hope. I mean, I'm certainly not as optimistic, and I really do hope I'm wrong. Like, I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I just see the quality of life that they created, and with following the data, it just sadly, specifically if you use Orange County as a microcosm, following the data, it's just sadly not the case.
Well, I was going to say the bleeding has to stop at some point, but also with the way redistricting is going to work, it's also probably going to favor Republicans, at least people I'm talking to in Orange County. 48 and Steele's seat will probably be relatively more conservative, or at least in a good enough position where she'll be able to hold it. Young Kim's seat probably going to have to go more south into Katie Porter's seat, which is where it leans up against the district. It'll probably become more conservative. And then if you look at Katie Porter's seat, they have to cut out a whole bunch of places. They're saying anywhere from 30 to 80,000 people will have to be cut out. I think it'll become more conservative, especially if it goes more south, which some people think, into that San Diego district. So at least in the short term,
I think it'll be tough, because you look at 48th district right now. When that was first created 10 years ago, I think it was like it had a 11-point Republican advantage, maybe it was 12-point, very, very high Republican advantage. Deanna Rohrabacher at the time even called it a gift. And it was a way that I saw that Democrats just that was just like, oh, this is a give up seat. We'll give it to the Republicans. Orange County, they don't have to give up seats anymore because it's become far more left wing than it used to.
Did they have the independent commission last time though? Sorry to interrupt.
It's an independent commission. I don't know how much I trust that process, but it is an independent commission.
It's better than gerrymandering though.
Yeah. Right. But regardless, it was an R+11 district. Now it's R+5. And it may have even since election day sunk to R4, and it's on a trajectory to continue.
It was 8 when I was in the primary. It was R+8 in the primary. R+8 in the primary. Yeah. So from the primary to the general, it dropped like 4. Porter's district was Romney won that by 12 points. So I don't think that, to your point, obviously there's some registration numbers, but there is also there's a coalition of voters that are really strongly against Trump in Orange County. And you can see that in his results and how his results he didn't do as well as like some of these congressional candidates did. And as he unless he runs again in 2024, but even if he does, as we get farther removed from 2020, I think things will start to slowly shift. Because I've talked to,
it's certainly possible. I think
if
like 48, if we weren't getting redistricted, I think you would see that kind of slowly stay at like an R+5. And, especially with Biden being the incumbent, it would give Steele the advantage going into the next election. And really, it's all theoretical now because we don't know how they're going to cut it up. But I know that if they were cut it up to be more friendly, for the 48th district, I don't think they can cut it up in a way that'd be more friendly than it is now. Like right now, it's so friendly and it's easy. I mean, you start cutting in like Santa Ana, right? You give a bigger slice of Santa Ana, like it's going to really hurt it. And there's just, especially with the downgrading registration, I'd imagine that the new version of the 48th will be something like R+3, 2. I don't know. I mean, it's all theoretical now, but it's harder to get better than it is now.
Yeah, the people I'm talking to, they're expecting that the districts will run more down the coast. So Porter's district will run down, not on the coast, but down more south into the San Diego district, which is more conservative. And then it'll probably be cut out more of the western and northern part, and the southern part might it's feasible that Steele could pick up like Mission Viejo in part of it into her district. And that's how it would become more conservative.
Yeah. That would be helpful. That would certainly be helpful.
So if you look at the map, like 45 has to get like multiple pieces moved in because it's like apparently like 5 to 10% overpopulated. All the other ones are underpopulated, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. We won't know until December, January.
Yeah, I mean, it's all theoretical now. I'm less optimistic just because seeing how friendly some of these districts were at one point, it's hard to cut it up in a way. You would really have to kind of gerrymander it to really benefit, us more, especially with the downfall of Republican registration. I think even going forward, I mean, just lack of sustainability there unless something massively changes around, which again, I'm very hopeful. I know I'm optimistic. I'm not rooting for that by any means. But I hope that something does change around quickly.
Yeah, I mean Texas was a blue state back in the '60s, so things shift. It happens. It goes back and forth. I always tell people that like California won't always be this red, and as things get worse, it'll at least have to shift somewhat. But let's see if there's anything else that we wanted to talk about. First, I do thank you for coming on and uh, taking time out. Maybe we can discuss 2024 a little bit since you're going down to Florida, and some people think your governor might run. What is your take on the elections? Obviously that's far out. It's 3 years until like any vote. Less, just a little under 3 years until what would be the May primaries. But what is your perception of 2024? Where the party's going nationally overall over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything indicates it's going more towards Trumpism and kind of MAGAism, which is ironic. I said I'm going to go and use my GI Bill in Florida to kind of just take a step back and think about what I want to do, maybe keep a little bit of a pulse on politics. But I think Florida 2024 is probably going to be the center of Republican presidential politics. Whether it's Governor DeSantis running or Donald Trump running, I don't think they'll both run. I think one will support the other more than likely. But I think Florida is going to play a very big role in those Republican primaries, and there's going to be the leading figure, whether it's Trump or DeSantis, from that state. So it is ironic I'm taking a step back in a place that is really much going to be the center of all of that. But yeah, I think DeSantis is probably the best governor in the state right now. He's sort of the anti-Newsom, so it's he's done everything the opposite way and has been far better. He values freedom. He doesn't take crap from the media. And I'll tell you this, before everything happened to me, I was much more of kind of establishment type of Republican. Like, let's not, push the bear, let's do this. But after what they did to me, everything I had to go through, that sort of Trump or DeSantis, like just punch back 10 times harder. I'm all about it now because I see, the real evil behind it and what they do. So I'm all about having, a tough, guy or girl go back and punch back when the media tries to play its games. DeSantis has done a fantastic job at that. Trump's obviously done a great job at that well too. So I think it'll be either of them. I know Nikki Haley will play a role. There's some other people that have been talked about, thinking about jumping in. I think those are kind of the big.
Let's talk. We didn't really talk about the recall, even though we talked about California. I have kind of my local committee does some polling, so I have access to a lot of emails, and it's been kind of interesting to see how things shift in the race. Grinnell was kind of surging, but I'm kind of hearing from multiple people I've talked to up and down the state that I would probably trust on good authority that as of right now he's not running, which really puts a little bit of a fork in the plans of like who are we going to get behind, because I think there was a little bit of a consensus around some people on both sides, either they're pro-Trump or not. If they weren't, if they're more establishment type, that he might have been the guy, because obviously he worked with Romney and Trump. And then now there's Faulkner and Cox and Jenner. We'll talk about that in a second here. But in terms of like traditional politicians, it's those two, and then you have Jenner, which we'll have to see, because I've seen more movement towards Jenner after this Fox News Sean Hannity interview. But before that, like there was I was getting like a lot of hate emails by just including Caitlyn Jenner in polls, and I'm like, Jenner's running. I don't make the decision. I'm just polling. You know what I mean? Like I'll tell you. But we had a lot of people that said, this won't ever come up on the ballot, I guess, unless Jenner and Newsom ever run against each other, which I don't think will happen, because if he gets recalled, then he's just done. But if you had to choose between Jenner and Newsom, what would you do? And you had the choice of those two, you were undecided, or you wouldn't vote at all. And we were having depending on we have different subsections of each polls. We sent them out over a 10-day period. It was 20 to 40% said they would stay home on the Republican side when Jenner was. So what is your what do you think about the recall? What do you think of its chances? Who do you think will be the candidate, or do you think we'll just have a divided field and it'll be hard to get to a consensus?
Well, from my understanding with how this recall is going to work, it's by a plurality. So if Governor Newsom gets 49% of the vote, he gets recalled. Vote for the recall, he's out. So all we need is that 51%, he's gone, which is awesome. So even if the next runner up gets like 18, 19%. They're still going to be the governor because 51% voted recall.
Oh, 50% plus one, right?
Yeah. So people aren't as 51%, excuse me. So people aren't as
no, it's not.
worried.
It's not 51, isn't it? 50% plus one. It's just
yeah,
one vote over 50.
Yeah. My bad.
That's okay.
But yeah, they.
It might be that close. That's why I just want to be clear.
Yeah. No, you're right. 100%. Yeah. The majority of it, the plurality, or that I'm all turned around. Lost my train of thought.
They don't teach math. They didn't teach us math at USC.
Yeah. We're political people, not science people. Yes. No. I mean, so it should be the highest vote getter in the as the runner-up. So even if it's like 18, 19%, they're going to be the governor. And so I'm less worried about a divided field as I would be in like the recent special election.
Oh, I think you froze. Let me see here. Let's see.
I really like Richard Grinnell a lot too. I think he's sort of like, I'm not going to take crap. I'm going to punch back 10 times harder. Sort of that, and he comes from the Trump world and he has that mindset. I think he's great, but I also do not believe he's going to do it. So with the candidates there, yeah, I mean, you got a lot of people running. I guess the big three are Cox, Jenner, and Faulkner. And I really like Caitlyn Jenner. I think she did a great job on Sean Hannity's interview. And I think and hope that she has the ability to bring some of these people who are unsure about her because of her gender identity home. Because the values are there. She was great with her conservative values on that Hannity interview.
I haven't watched it yet. I need to react.
It was really good.
It'll be on the reaction, yeah.
It was really, really good. So I think I was a bit hesitant at first because last time we had a recall with a big superstar running, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He came in, he was going to clean everything up. And as you and I both know, he was not a very good governor. He was a pretty bad governor. So he
compared to Newsom, I don't know if I really want to say that.
But certainly, I mean, a dining room table would be better than Newsom.
100 times out of 100 if that was a choice.
Yeah, totally. Agreed. But we had a real opportunity with him, and he still, in my view, did a very bad job. Caitlyn Jenner was talking about some things more conservatively than even Schwarzenegger had. And she is a rock star. And, she was sort of the it girl of 2015. Democrats, praised her. They loved her. She was an icon. She was an idol, And now she's running as the Republican. That's going to be hard to undo all the glory they gave to her over those last couple of years. And I think in our period of time right now, it's especially Democrats want to be more careful with their insults or tearing down of a transgender woman. So it does, as silly as that identity aspect is, because again, I'm about policy and things being done, not about various different identity politics. That does serve to the advantage of the Republicans, in my view. And I think the beauty of it too, with her in particular, is she's not obsessed with this identity politics herself. When Joy Behar misgendered her, when there was some comedian a couple years ago making fun of her, and they asked her about it, and typically these left-wing celebrities would be like, that's offensive, they should be canceled. She was just like, live and let live. It's a joke. People got to take a joke. And I love that. I
haven't seen that. So, even when I was following, I didn't know a lot about Grinnell, and everyone, he's gay, so that's why he should be the guy. And I'm like, well, that have to do with anything. I'm not going to vote for someone because they like dudes. Not going to happen. Sorry.
It shouldn't make a difference either way. I completely agree. And politically, there's some advantage to it. But regardless, at the end of the day, it's policy and how you perform, which is best, and how you are as a person. And I think both Rick Grinnell, Caitlyn Jenner, the LGBT community aspect, as far as a pragmatic side, I think it shouldn't matter either way. And I would support either one of them, running. Just based off, I think they'd both be good governors. And something I really liked about Jenner on the interview with Sean Hannity was that she said, what I liked about Trump was he came in and he shook things up, and that's what I wanted. He was an outsider and he shook things up and really challenged a lot of these authorities that were never challenged before. If she could go in there and do that and use her star power to do that, maybe she could change the state around. She said a lot of good things.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I know what I'm seeing in the numbers is that there's a lot of Republicans, and I honestly have my reservations about having a governor that would potentially, shove transgenderism down our throats, and it's not something that I necessarily want out of a governor. With that said, I think if you ask me, would I rather have Newsom or Jenner? I'd vote for Jenner just because I don't
That's a
want Newsom.
no-brainer.
So, but that's
A
not
thousand
the
times
choice,
over,
right?
a million times, I'd rather have
I
Jenner
think
over Newsom.
Jenner's, when I look at Jenner now, unless Jenner just gets a ton of like inherent name recognition from Republicans, kind of like Schwarzenegger did. You have Jenner, and there's no real clear Democrat on the left. I think a lot of Democrats voted for Arnold because he was known. He was like a known commodity, and I think that same thing
Absolutely.
could happen. While I think Grinnell could, probably solidify the Republican base, albeit it's kind of small in California at this point. All 30, 2 to 40% of us, but Jenner has the potential to get maybe like a smaller portion of that base, but also like more of the moderate to like some left leaners that just know the name and they just go to the booth because they're already voting to maybe they're voting to keep Newsom in, but they want someone like they don't know who to vote for. Otherwise, they just vote for Caitlyn Jenner because they know the name. It's an unfortunate reality of politics, but that happens. So
totally,
yeah,
she's a rock star, just like Arnold was. They're both rock stars. They're well known. People will vote for them.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Like I said, when I first when people were trying to make the argument to me about Grinnell because of his sexual orientation, I didn't really consider him until I started hearing him talk more, and they obviously put him on Fox News a ton. But it doesn't sound like he's running. We'll see. He can always change his mind.
Yeah, I don't anticipate him running just because a lot of those Trump people who've gotten behind Jenner, who I would assume would get behind him otherwise. And we're getting later as the time goes on. The doors closing.
6 months out.
Yeah, I mean, if he does, awesome. I mean, he's that guy. That guy is awesome. He doesn't take crap from anybody. He's smart as heck. He'd be a phenomenal governor. It would be awesome. I don't think he'll jump in, and if he doesn't, and we have these three, Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, I also think she would also be a phenomenal governor because she could shake things up, and she is that kind of political outsider. And she had a really compelling, good interview. I think she's a really good person. She's a rock star celebrity. There's a lot she brings to the table, and I think it'd be really cool to have her get across the finish line. And quite frankly, Democrats are always claiming the first. Oh, we have the first this, we have the first that. We would have the first transgender governor in the country as Republicans. That'd be kind of cool.
I guess
we could say, hey, we have one of the first two.
We're winding down here. We're almost at the hour mark. I'm going to ask you a few questions if you don't mind, kind of rapid fire. We'll end with these predictions. You get to say Republican, Democrat, or a name, first name that comes to your mind. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Who will have control of the House in January of 2023?
Republicans.
Who will have control of the Senate?
Democrats.
Who will be governor of California in January of 2023? No, wait, let me say January of 2022.
Jenner.
Okay. Who will be president after the 2024 election?
Trump.
Okay. I think those are all my little rapid fire questions. So you think he's running? We didn't really talk about that.
It's a tough one. I don't even think he knows. I don't think anyone knows. If he runs, he's going to be the Republican nominee. Let's just say that for sure.
Yeah, I talked about it. I posted it on our YouTube channel about his interview with Sean Hannity regarding that. And he had said some things where he said, oh, it's a long time out. I mean, how old is he? He's pretty old. So it'd be
he's in his 70s.
He's getting up there. I don't know if he wants to put himself through that. That's what I told, people on that reaction. So anything you want to add here, maybe where people can follow you, and we'll put this up on our YouTube probably on Saturday or Sunday. Like I said, it's May 6th today on a Thursday, and then we will include it in some of our emails out. But anything you want to add where people can find you, how they can support your current legal efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put a plug in again. It's Pushed Back on Defamatory Lies, organized by Jordan Tygh. That's last name Tango Yankee Golf Hotel. It's my way of raising money to stand up to the left-wing media, Democrat left-leaning organizations who blatantly, falsely accused me, didn't correct the records, lied about me, and got away with it. And by me standing up to them, it shows them that they can't do that to other innocent people in the future. It's pushing back on that sort of behavior that they see as working for them right now. So if you believe in that cause and believe in standing up to the left and meeting their allies in the media, please donate to my cause, because I'm on a journey to do that right now.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'll try to include that if you want to send me a link over in the email that I put out and say, hey, this is what he's working on. Make sure to give it a watch, give it a like. give it a subscribe on our end, and then learn more about you as well. Well, next time I'm sure you'll be in Orange County again at some point. Next time you're in Orange County, let's grab a beer. Let's catch up. For one, I want to get your advice on some things that I'm working on too. We didn't really have. It's not what that wasn't the point of this, but I got some stuff that I've obviously been working on too. So thank you for jumping on and taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it, and of course, fight on. Oops, sorry, here. Fight on. There we go. And for everybody watching, make sure to like and subscribe to the Politician Reacts YouTube channel, and like and subscribe or like and share on Facebook. This has been episode 2 of the Politician ReactsCAST. Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks, Brian.